Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am very excited. I am here with longtime guest of the channel, Gamer Guy. He's been on a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh content that's been on this channel, but he's never been on Magic content until today. So, what do you know about Magic the Gathering?
That's very funny you say that. I honestly do have barely any knowledge of Magic other than it's a card game, and you put like these cards down that create the resources so you can put monsters down. That's literally all I know
Uh,
about what Magic is.
yeah, pretty accurate. You do need land to play all these cards, which is foreign to Yu-Gi-Oh. We just slap stuff down.
No,
So
there's a field spell.
So, what we're gonna do, I will be showing Gamer Guy some Magic cards. They could be really good, they could be really bad, they could just be average. And based on his card game knowledge coming from Yu Gi Oh!, see if he got the smarts to know if these cards are good or bad. We got some tricky ones
Uh,
in here.
we'll find out. We'll find out
We'll
together,
find
people.
out. So, I'm gonna start you off with a fairly easy one. This
There we go.
is Murder. A very simple card, just destroy a target creature. That's all it does. Just any creature on the field, you can destroy it.
With a card like Murder, um, it says instant. I mean, it's clearly just destroy one monster. And that's about it. I assume it is pretty good if it allows you to destroy a target. It destroys a monster on the field.
Yes. So instant does mean you can do it anytime. Basically, it's basically like a quick play spell, kind of equivalent to Magic, except you don't have to set it.
Oh, I see.
So murder. So you're saying it's a pretty good card.
Yeah, I think so.
So murder is actually pretty bad, and
Wait, really?
so the reason why this is kind of a little tricky on my part. It's because of how much it costs to cast. Because you need 3 mana to cast it. The thing on the top right, that's how much mana like land you have to tap to be able to play the spell. And there's just better
Mm,
removal options for less mana. It's an okay card, but it's one of the cards where you will never play it because there's just better versions of it.
I see. I kind of want to. I figured that's the top right was cost of something. I thought it
Yeah.
was 1 mana just because of the big one
Yeah.
on the card.
If it's a number, that means it can be any color mana, but when it's like the skulls or the fire, that means it has to be that specific mana.
Oh, I see. I see.
So I want to toss in this one, which is an effect I think has a Yu-Gi-Oh player used to be very familiar with this kind of effect. This is Divination. Just draw 2 cards.
Oh, this looks like a familiar card. I know that's on the ban list right now.
It's a card. I don't know what it does, but I'm sorry for making that
Unfortunately,
joke.
I wish I could remember, but the draw two cards is bringing back some memories of a certain card. But yeah, Divinitation. Uh, well, as I know now, it costs 3 mana
Yep.
to. I'm assuming to bring it out. It's not a. It's a. Is this a creature of some sort, or is it like?
Sorcery is basically like a normal spell card in Yu-Gi-Oh. Well, you have to that you can only play that
Oh,
at
okay.
like chain one, essentially.
Okay. If that's the case, and it costs 3 mana, I think the card like draw two cards like drawing cards in any other card game is much different compared to Yu-Gi-Oh, as Yu-Gi-Oh is
Yeah,
all about card advantage.
that's it.
Um, I think this card with 3 mana is probably like okay. Like it's an okay thing to bring it, like an okay card to activate. Maybe it's a it's good, but I still think it's like average. It's an average Magic card.
Alright, so I didn't trick you. I tried tricking you with this one. So it's definitely not a good card. No one near to level Pot of Greed because it's a sorcery spell and you have to pay mana. It's not just free like Pot of Greed is. It wouldn't really call it good just because it costs so much mana to play when you can just be using that mana as something else. Drawing cards in Magic
Mm-hmm.
is still good, but at a sorcery speed, most of the good draw spells in Magic are instant because you can use it during the opponent's like end phase essentially. But
Right.
because it's a sorcery, you have to use that mana, and you can't like keep it up for anything else. So while drawing cards is good, there's cards that are definitely better. It's not bad per se because I mean drawing cards will always be a useful mechanic. There's just better ways to draw cards.
Yeah, I see. I figured it wasn't that good of a card. That it was a normal spell or
Yeah.
like a generic sorcery card, and it required so much mana. It had the same amount of mana as destroying a creature.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, if the mana was cheaper, this card if there's like 1 mana, this card would probably be insane, but 3 mana is way too much. This one is a staple in videos kind of like this. This is 1 with nothing. For 1 black mana, you discard your entire hand.
discard your entire hand.
All for 1 black mana.
It's really hard to think of because in Yu-Gi-Oh, that's like the worst effect ever. That
It triggers
that,
dangers. It's broken. Imagine this in dangers.
that's like playing 3 copies of Pot of Generosity in your deck. Like, why would you play that? I do not see any. Yeah, it's an instant card. It costs 1 mana, and it's just discard your hand. Unlike, I don't think this is a good card at all. Honestly, like this feels like obvious bait, but I'm gonna say it. What? How on earth can this card be useful in any way, shape, or form?
Alright, so you are correct. This card is widely considered to be one of, if not the worst Magic card ever printed. It's terrible. There's so many better ways to get cards. Like, there's some cards that want to be in the graveyard. There's just so many fucking better ways to do it by like draw and discard, or just like discard 1 card to pay a cost for another card. This card sees no play whatsoever. It's awful. You are correct in your assumption.
Good. that's not good in any card game. Like,
I can't think of a card game. If there's a card game with effect like this that's good, I kind of want to be playing it. This one should be fun. This is Red Elemental Blast. For 1 red mana, it's an instant. You can counter target spell, which is basically like negating a spell in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or you can destroy a target blue permanent. Also worth noting, most counter spells are blue spells. There's like a few in the other colors, but like 90% of counter spells are blue. And this does counter, but only counters specifically blue spells, or it can destroy a blue permanent, which is basically just like a card that stays on the field.
this is pretty interesting because it allows you to. It's a negate for a certain card type as well as a pop of a certain card.
Right.
It only costs 1, and it can work on your opponent's turn.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Does have cards like White Hole, Anti-Regeki. These kind of cards do exist in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yes, there is some cards in Yu-Gi-Oh that counter certain cards. The first comparison, funny enough to me, was counter.
It is kind of like that. Yeah, it just counters the counter spells. That's true, actually. I forgot that card existed.
It's good because that makes sense. No, nobody plays it.
It's pretty bad.
But I think it's a pretty good card because it could still be used to just destroy a card if you're not going to use it to counter a certain blue spell. And I'm just going to assume there's like pretty average amounts of like blue spell cards that be played in the deck. I don't know, like good ones or bad ones. I think it's a pretty good card. Only costing 1 mana, and it works on your opponent's turn.
I thought I was going to trick you with this one because of the White Hole and all the counter. This card is really good because since there's so many counter spells, like this is like a staple in like the really high power formats because there's so many like counter spells flinging, and just a 1 mana, just a counter wall between the two is really good. There's a lot of blue is one of the best colors in Magic, especially the older formats. So this card sees a lot of play, namely in the side deck and like some metas with blue dominated. It's even main deckable, but like this is like a side deck staple in the formats it's playable in.
I see. Well, like the difference is between cards like White Hole and Counter that requires White Hole specifically. You have to hope your opponent plays Dark Hole.
Yeah.
Like and for Counter, you need specifically counter trap cards, and I don't think a lot of decks play counter trap cards nowadays.
Yeah.
At all. So.
The dang breed.
That's what made me think, and also it has the destruction. So it doesn't have to just be a counter.
Yeah, it has that versatility. I will say it doesn't see that much play for the destruction. It's mostly for the counter.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
This is Lion's Eye Diamond. It costs 0 to play, but to use it, you have to discard your entire hand. Again, we got another discard hand. But you add 3 mana of any color.
Well, with magic, I assume the creatures in this game have a good amount of effects that require mana while they're out, as well as other cards not costing any mana at all to play, so you can add 3. I think it's an okay card.
It's an okay card, even though you have to discard your hand to add the 3 mana.
I feel like mana is pretty. I think mana is pretty important in a game like Magic. Yeah. So discarding your hand to get 3 mana of any color is probably pretty good.
Dang, I thought you were gonna get that wrong. That's actually a good assumption. This card is incredibly good. It's so good, in fact, Vintage, which is the format where every Magic card is legal. Like there's no ban list at all. If a card, they can be restricted, meaning you can only play 1 copy. This card is restricted. It is the king of like FTKs basically, because you just dump out your hand, and then there's cards that you cast spells from your graveyard, including Lion's Eye Diamond. So you just loop those 2 together, and you just have basically unlimited mana because it's not once per turn. Sack it, add 3 mana, bring it back. Sack it, add 3 mana, bring it back, and you just have infinite mana.
Oh, I see.
This card is incredibly good. Also, very expensive. Do you want to wager a guess how much one copy of this card is?
Just about as much as any staple in Yu-Gi-Oh.
It is $538 currently.
Jesus Christ.
It's a very powerful card. If a card's played in like one of like the unlimited formats, it's going to be super expensive. This being no exception, because it's restricted for a reason.
Yeah. Well, if it can cause a loop like that, I can assume it's going to cost so much money.
This is Faithless Looting. So, for 1 mana, just draw 2, discard 2, and flashback pretty much means for that cost, you can cast it from your graveyard. So you can pay like a little bit extra to cast for your graveyard, and then that's gone.
I'm trying to find a decent card to compare it to.
I believe there's a few cards you could do that. There's one that like it's the opposite. You discard 2, then draw 2. I think it's like Card Destruction or something like that. So it's kind of like the inverse.
Card Destruction discards your whole hand, then draw that same amount. I'm trying to find one similar to specific numbers. I get.
It's Card Destruction and Hand Destruction. I forget the name of it.
Like Elemental Hero Liquid Soldier's second effect if it's used for fusion material. I think this is actually a pretty solid card. Like I think this is a pretty average staple. Costs like 1 fire. I assume that's fire.
A mountain, but it's mountain fire. Same shit. Fire comes from mountain. It's close enough.
It costs 1 mana to activate it. Allows you to draw 2 and discard 2. Well, in this case with flashback, there are some cards that could be useful in the graveyard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it has a pretty decent graveyard effect to let you do it again. So overall, I think this is a pretty solid card, and I think it's going to be I think it's a staple in most Magic decks.
So you are right. This is a very good card. It's actually banned in one of the formats called Modern. Outside of that, it's illegal in the formats it's legal in, but it's good. You draw 2, you dig through your deck. If you have a graveyard deck, you set up your graveyard. It's a staple basically in decks that want creatures in their graveyard, because it gives you card advantage to dig through the things that pay off for the stuff in your graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
So your assessment is pretty spot on, actually.
One little comment before we continue, though. What is this card art? What? This feels so different compared to every other card that you just showed me.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think it looks perfectly normal.
What? Okay. There's like something I could make in Photoshop right now.
Yeah, this was... A lot of people had that reaction. They saw this version of the card. There's different versions, but I chose this one because I just wanted the reaction from it.
Good. Well, you got the reaction. Like, what?
This will be a test.
Let's see.
Some harder stuff. This is Brainstorm. You draw 3 cards, and then you put 2 cards from your hand on the top of your library in any order. Library is just your deck.
Costing 1, it's instant. I don't see any. I mean, the one place I know there's like 2 places a card in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's 2 places a card does not want to be, and that's banished face down or in your deck. Yeah. So it allows you to put it on top of your deck, and it allows you to put it in any order instead of just randomly shuffled back in.
Yeah.
So it allows you to get 3, maybe get 2 cards that you don't need and return them back in any order for a potential next turn.
Yeah.
I think this is another staple card that a good amount of people would play in decks, in Magic decks. That's my answer.
So you are right, but kind of for the wrong reasons. But you're still right. So this is a staple. This card is really good because you draw 3 and you put. Like, Magic doesn't really have like garnets, really, because most things are just 4s. You don't really there's no cards that like interact with like cards in the deck in the way like Brilliant Fusion or something like that does.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason Brainstorm is so good, you draw the 3 cards, you put 2 cards on top of your deck that you don't want in your hand because you can't play them or you don't need them, like the lands you don't need or creatures you can't cast at all anytime soon. There are ways in Magic to very easily shuffle your deck. There's lands that can sacrifice themselves, so you search a library, so you have to shuffle. And because of that, you can pretty much get rid of those 2 cards completely and just shuffle them back into your deck essentially for free. So that's kind of why Brainstorm is like a really big staple. That's like the main reason Brainstorm gets played. And also, even in drawing 3 cards, especially at instant speed, you can do it like when your opponent's done with their turn, so you don't even have to waste a mana on your turn.
I see.
Yeah. I thought I might have got you on that one, but you're killing this. You're doing very well.
Thank you. I honestly thought I was going to fail miserably and get every single one of these wrong. I'll be real.
You're like getting them right and for the right reasons too. I thought for sure I was going to get you on the red elemental blast. I want to kind of surprise me a little bit. I thought I was being cheeky. This is Blood Moon. It's an enchantment, which is basically the equivalent of like a continuous spell, essentially. It just makes all non-basic lands into mountains, which means they just tap for red mana, essentially. That's basically what this says. All lands only tap for red.
Does it stay on the field and this effect, lingers throughout
It stays on the field until it's removed. It's like a continuous spell.
What's the point of playing non-basic lands then? What's the point of playing non-basic lands into mountains when you could just play, cards that have mountains mana on it? And it costs 3 to even play it to begin with, unless I think a comparison I can think of this card at the moment is DNA Surgery or like Zombie World.
That's a fair comparison.
Cards, types or attributes.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is like a pseudo tough one, but I kind of see. I don't see a reason to play this like. At all. If you need cards, if you need like cards, to have mountain mana, why not just simply play mountain mana based cards?
Right.
And it costs 3 mana to even play, plus 1 mountain mana. I'm assuming because I can see 2 in the 1.
Yeah.
So okay. So yeah, I don't think this is a good card at all. Like.
So you compared it to DNA Surgery and the like. This card is a lot more like Mystic Mind. This is the first whiff you have. So you don't play it for yours. You play it because it makes your opponent's lands in the mountains.
That's what I was thinking of too. Before I made the comparison to like Zombie World and stuff, I was like, this kind of looks like a floodgate of sort, but like,
yeah, this is.
I mostly thought it was meant to benefit yourself and not your be a downside to your opponent.
This is very much a floodgate. The decks that are playing this are decks that are basically like mono red because it doesn't affect them at all. And most lands in Magic are non-basic, especially in some of the older formats. And this card, it just puts, if you don't have like any red cards, if you can't have a way to remove this, you basically just are locked out of the game. And like a lot of times, the enchantment removal is in the colors you're playing. So unless you have like a colorless enchantment removal in your deck, you're just stuck with basically being unable to play. This card is very, very good.
That's actually a solid card, and you compared it to Mystic Mine, which makes me feel sad now. The inside.
Yeah. This is basically if someone sees this get played with them, it's like, it's very much Mystic. If you don't have the out, you literally just lose the game. It's just like Mystic Mine in that regard.
All right, well, time to play some MSTs in my deck.
Alright, let's bring up. This is Pale Moon. So it essentially makes any non-basic land tap for a colorless mana instead of a mana it would produce.
I actually think this is a pretty average card. Like, it only costs 2 mana to play, first of all. Yeah. And for the whole turn, they will get only generic colorless mana instead of the normal one. And I noticed a lot of Magic cards do require certain colors of mana to activate. So overall, I think this is a pretty decent card that allows you to lock your opponent out of not activating cards because, without the right colored mana.
Okay, so this card's actually really bad. I kind of tricked you a little bit after Blood Moon. So the reason this card is bad is because they can still make the mana, and it's only non-basic lands it affects. Because people still, even in the decks with a lot of non-basics, they'll still have some basics a lot of the time. So they'll just use the non-basic for the generic cost, and then just tap the regular thing for the spells they want to play. And it's not an enchantment; it's only for the one turn, and then it's just gone. Basically, you instead of playing a card like this, you just play a counter spell just to prevent the spells from coming in the first place. Because this is essentially kind of a do-nothing card because they can still play the spells. It just makes it slightly harder, but not to any significant degree.
I see. Did you say Pale Moon is like Blood Moon before I started explaining why the card was pretty solid?
Yeah, I kind of threw it in after Blood Moon, kind of a little bit of a curveball, a little cheeky curveball.
I just noted, it took me until you said it now, oh my god, it's just a retrain of Blood Moon.
It's just the worst Blood Moon because it's only one turn, and
I should have known as soon as I saw the being similar to Blood Moon in a way. Okay, this is not a good card.
We haven't brought in removal for a while, so let's bring up back removal. This is Path to Exile. Again, exile pretty much means banished, essentially, in Yu-Gi-Oh terms.
Mm-hmm.
And this will exile any creature, but the controller of that creature gets to put a basic land from the deck onto the battlefield.
That does not sound like a good effect at all. Banish a card. That's the positive, but the downside is they get a free search for any basic land card and immediately activate it, no less.
It does enter the battlefield tapped, but you can do this whenever after all the mana is already spent, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, this card is after Pale Moon. Honestly, now I'm wondering, is this bait? Is this the best card in the game right now? But okay, well, whether it's bait or not, I still think Path to Exile is not a good card at all because it's just a free search for your opponent that after you banish one creature card. So yeah, that all that needs to be said about it, really.
Okay, so this card is actually nuts. It's one of the best removal spells in the entire game because it only costs 1 mana, and the trade-off of getting rid of a creature that will win the game to just give them a basic land is 99% of the time worth it. Because I can either remove this creature and give them a land, or I can just die next turn. And for 1 mana, it's cheap. It does have the little trade-off, but it's so minute in the grand scheme of things that having removal that cheap for something that important to not die is what makes this card so good.
I assumed otherwise just because it's a free search for a land card, and I know land cards are the cards that give you mana that allows you to cast stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty much it's an unfortunate trade-off, but it's a trade-off that is worth it in the grand scheme of things, essentially, for cheap removal and being able to just pretty much trade a very terrifying monster for a basic land. This is Propaganda. Which enchantment that makes creatures unable to attack you unless the attacker pays 2 mana for each attacking creature.
First off, I love this card art, by the way. This actually looks pretty cool looking. Not gonna lie.
It is actually really cool. Propaganda has really nice art.
I haven't really been mentioning the card art, except for Faithless Looting. I actually really like every single card art that you've shown me so far.
Magic, that's one thing I like a lot about Magic. They have really good art. And unlike Yu-Gi-Oh, you can actually see the artist name for all of them.
Oh, you can? Oh, I just noticed. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. I like this. I like that.
One of the few card games.
Back to the card at hand. Propaganda. Creatures can't attack unless they pay 2 mana for each creature. That sounds like the most annoying card to play against to me. Like, oh my god. What's there's like I know there's like a Yu-Gi-Oh equivalent to this. Like I know there's a card that you have to pay life points for your month. There's a continuous spell that allows you to do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I wish I remember the name. I think it was like what, Toll or something, or is that
something like that? It might be Toll. That sounds right. It's an old card. I know that much.
I know it's an old card, but for only 3, and it allows you to, for like just you have to pay mana to attack. Yeah, I think this is a pretty solid card. Another floodgate, I guess.
Yeah.
They're equivalent to one. So, since they have to waste so much mana just to attack you. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you are correct. This only is legal in 3 formats, not because like it's broken, because the sets it came out in. And like Vintage and Legacy, this card sucks because those formats are basically Yu-Gi-Oh! Where they last 2 turns, so odds are you won't even be able to cast it. But it is legal in a format called Commander, which is basically, if a card's not banned, it's a singleton format, so like one of every card. And this is like a staple in it. It's called Stacks, which is basically you just make everyone unable to play the game, and most people hate it. And yeah, this card's really frustrating to play against. Your assessment is very much correct.
I figured. That's such a big cost to use. And it's so worth it in the end. Makes your opponent lose so much mana.
And speaking of propaganda, if you're enjoying this video, you should subscribe. You scroll down, leave a comment, a like, maybe ring that bell.
I can't believe you pulled that move on me right now.
There's actually 2 cards with the exact same effect. I chose this card just for that bit. This one, it's going to be a little complicated, but I think this is a card that a lot of people would want to see, a non-Magic player. So I'll walk you through this card.
Oh god.
This is Oko, Thief of Crowns.
Okay.
So this is a Planeswalker, which basically, it's kind of a creature, but it can't attack, essentially. The like little thing on the bottom right, the number is essentially its health, and then the +2 will give it +2 health, and then do that ability. The +1 will do the same, or the minus will take away that much health from it to use that ability. So you can give him essentially 2 extra life to make a food token, which that's just a card that goes on the field that you can sacrifice to just gain 3 life. You can give it 1 extra life to make any artifact or creature. Those are like things that go on the battle that can be on the battlefield. They will lose all abilities and just become 3/3 vanilla creatures. And then you can -5 to just exchange control of a target or artifact that you have for an artifact or creature that the opponent controls power 3 or less.
So you said, so bottom right's like their current life right now, right?
They see the life, and then they can either, and then the thing, like the +2, the +1, the -5, they'll do that to that number, and then the ability to the right of it is what also happens when you choose one of those. And you only choose one of those per turn.
Okay, so each one of all these effects are once per turn, correct?
You can only use one of them in the entire turn. Like, you can't use like 2 effects in one turn. You can only choose 1 in one turn.
Oh, I see. Okay, what other questions I need real quick before I start making assumptions? I assume you needed to gain life before you use its final effects that allows you to.
Yeah, you have to plus it so it has 5 to be able to use that effect. You can't like go negative. It has to be at least exact or more.
Can it be 0 or just that get rid of the monster?
If it goes to 0, it goes away.
You can just you give it +1 life. It allows it to basically just become a beat stick with barely any toughness.
So this is not a creature; it's a planeswalker. It'll make any target artifact or creature. Artifacts are basically like again just kind of like continuous spells, and then a creature is like a monster. This is kind of a weird middle, kind of like a continuous trap. I guess is the best synonym for it.
Well, with a card like that, it has its own assortment effects. It allows you to bring out a token, negate effects, and change it to just a basic creature.
And the +1 is also permanent. It's not like till end of turn. It stays a 3/3 vanilla monster.
Oh, the +1 effect is a permanent change?
The creature it targets is permanent, so it permanently becomes a 3/3 with no abilities.
I feel like Oko is a pretty good solid card. With it, although it's once per turn, it still has its benefits. It allows. I pretty much. I feel like what people would use it for is change it to probably use its first effect, its second effect, its +1 effect, and then probably use its -5 to gain control of a power 3 or less creature. Use it. I feel actually. You know what? I think that last effect. I don't think a lot of people use. I think people use it for its second effect and maybe the +2 effect to get a token.
Okay.
To give yourself, because the token you said it gives you more life, or the
it's a token that you pay 2 mana and sacrifice it, and you gain 3 life. That's all it does.
I still think the card is pretty solid, and most likely people use it for its second effect and maybe the first one. I don't see any use for the third one now that I think about it more. So
okay.
That's what I think. I think it's just a solid card with a pretty good second effect.
Okay, so you are right. The -5 effect is basically never ever used.
Mm-hmm.
What you are wrong in is you said it's a pretty good card.
Yes.
That might be the understatement of the century. This is one of the best cards ever printed in Magic, if not the best. So it's banned in almost every single format. The +1, because it's a +1, it can just keep doing it unless you can like attack the Oko. But it basically makes any creature the opponent plays worthless, because the next turn they are just going to get elked and become a 3/3 vanilla monster.
Right.
Because in Magic, creatures can't attack the turn they are played. They have summoning sickness. So before they can even attack, Oko can turn them into an elk, and then you just protect your Oko.
Oh, well, if you tell me that monsters can't attack the moment they're out, then I could probably say otherwise, like, oh god, this card's actually pretty good. Not gonna lie.
I did forget that's a pretty important detail I did kind of forget about, but yeah, pretty much everyone +1 this. This was one of the like quickest bans in Magic history. It was an insanely powerful card, completely nuts. It's even restricted in like Vintage, which is like the highest power format, because it's just that good of a card.
Told me about summoning sickness, I probably would have said, yeah, this card's busted because, like you said before, they pretty much got to get rid of it as soon as possible. If not, like, they better have a creature with essentially plus, like, with 6 power to even get rid of it.
Yeah. The main reason why it was so busted is because the effect to like elk something was a plus instead of a minus. Because usually effects like that are minus on Planeswalkers, but for whatever reason, it was a plus. And so it just completely broke Oko.
Why does it feel like they accidentally swapped the values? It should be -5 for the target for a second effect.
Yeah, this is widely considered to be one of the worst design mistakes in Magic. Closing in on the end, so we got about 3 or 4 more. This one is Korvold, the Fey Cursed King. Costs 5 mana to play. And when he enters the battlefield or attacks, you have to sacrifice a permanent, which is something that just stays on the field. It can be a land, an artifact, a creature. And then when you sacrifice a permanent, it gets a 1/1 counter, which each 1/1 counter just adds up to its power toughness. So 2 1/1s makes it a 6/6, etc. And you draw a card whenever you sacrifice something.
Costs 5 minutes to play, and it has. Is this do you have to do the sacrifice like every turn? I'm assuming
it's when it enters the battlefield, and then when it attacks, you have to sacrifice a permanent.
That does not. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a counter, and then draw a card. Well,
the first effect does cause the second effect to trigger.
Okay. Well, I like the benefit. Well, it costs a lot of mana to just bring the card out in the first place, and you have to basically keep sacrificing permanent cards for you to use it. But the upside is it gets stronger and it draws a card. Makes it it's like, is there any solid removal in Magic at all? Like, is there a Raigeki?
I mean, we saw Path of Exile earlier.
That's true. We did saw Path of Exile. Honestly, I'm gonna scroll back and just reread. If this card is good, I'm sorry for all the Magic players out there, but I'm gonna say this. This reminds me of like terrible cards, terrible Yu-Gi-Oh cards like Panther Warrior and Insect Queen.
I was looking for like the fakest king,
or another card like Yubel. That's another card that I can think of. But yeah, with Corvold, I don't think like I could see the use. Like I could see it with a free draw, and it gets stronger, but it requires you to sacrifice another creature for that effect to even resolve. And I assume it does cost a bit of mana to bring out creatures or bring out a permanent. Excuse me. I'll just say it's not a solid card at all. I don't think so. I see its uses, but with so much mana for it to bring out, and it has a maintenance cost and all that, with like a minor plus, I don't think so. I don't think it's not that good.
Alright, so we've got another whiff. This card is super good, and the reason why it costs a little bit, 5 is a little bit steep. Green can kind of help put lands out, like kind of cheat some lands out to kind of make it be easier to cast. But on the field, there's a lot of decks that want to sacrifice like permanents, so it's basically like the star of those decks because they're like effects that trigger when creatures die, and you want to keep sacrificing creatures, and that will build up Corvold. Like anything that gets sacrificed, it doesn't have to be through Corvold's effect; it will trigger. So even without the attack cost, it still goes stronger, and you draw a bunch of cards, and you just swing out with like a big giant dumb dragon. It's fairly easy to flood the field with like creature like tokens in Magic, and there's no like board limits. You can have as many as you want. So it's fairly easy to have sacrifice fodder for the effect. Sometimes it can fuck you into like sacrifice like lands to keep it on the field. But yeah, this card is very, very good.
Okay, I see you.
I think this was the ones I thought might trick you up.
Yeah, it did, because like it just feels like a steep cost for it to use its benefits properly.
Yeah, this is Force of Will. The first counterspell, counter target spell is basically like the equivalent of like Solemn Judgment, working counter, whatever. So it does cost 5 mana. You can pay a life and exile another blue card from your hand to essentially cast it for free.
So it destroys it negates a spell.
Yeah.
And you can banish a blue card from your hand instead of paying the 5 mana.
Yeah, banish a blue card and pay a life instead of paying the 5 mana to normally cast it.
It's only 1 life, and you I have to wonder how good blue cards are if that's.
Blue is kind of the color of like control decks. Is like the main like color identity. It's very control-y.
Okay, well, the mana cost is steep for a negate, but that makes sense, I suppose. But I believe there was like a few cards above that pretty much did this thing, but better. But the ability to just pay 1 life and then discard a specific card from your hand, to banish a card from your hand to instead of paying the cost. It's I think it's a pretty solid card. It mostly runs with decks that have blue cards.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying if it's comparing to control decks. I think most control decks would don't want to get rid of the cards they have in their hand. This feels a little tough because like I said, the banish 1 card that may not be.
Ending on some tricky ones.
I'll just say it's a pretty solid card with a pretty good alternative way to activate it by just paying 1 life and then banishing a card from your hand.
So Force of Will is one of the best counterspells ever printed in Magic. While it does cost 5 mana, no one is ever casting it for 5 mana. It's always being cast for its free alternate cost.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I figured.
Because exiling a blue card doesn't matter when it counted. Because you're saving this for like. Because it counters any spell, not like a specific kind of spell. You're saving it for like your opponent's win condition to just cast it free. Because like if you're tapped out, they're gonna think, oh, I can play my spell, I can play my win condition because you can't do anything. And then you force roll them. It's like, oh, okay, and you just exile a card you don't need, or it's not gonna be relevant. It's worth trading off to just counter that spell.
Yeah.
Pretty much in Magic, if a spell is free, odds are it's really good. No matter almost no matter what the cost is.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like I feel like it's a pretty solid card just for its extra. You know, it allows you to target any spell, and it's has an alternative way to activate that doesn't require the mana cost, and it just benefits you in a way. Like because I assume not a lot of people really care about losing life.
No, it's like Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, life is just a resource essentially.
Yeah, that's what I thought. All right,
we're on to our very last card. I saved what I think might be the hardest for last.
Oh god.
This is Necropotent. It costs 3 black mana, and it's enchantment. And if you always skip your draw step, and then whenever you discard a card, you exile that card from your graveyard, and then you pay 1 life, and you exile the top card of your deck face down, and that goes into your hand at the start of your next end step.
Okay, so it costs 3. Pay. You can't do you can't draw phase. You can't draw cards, and whenever you have to discard one, you banish it. But it has the effect to pay 1 life to send the top card face down and then put it to your hand at the end phase.
Yeah, during your next end phase, all the cards you exiled, face down with that effect go into your hand.
Oh, is the pay 1 life not once per turn?
It is a not once per turn effect. As long as you have life to pay, you can use it.
Oh, okay. Now that I think about it.
But you permanently, as long as on the field, you do not get to draw cards when your turn comes around.
Yeah, that's what I like. But it has that effect though. You can. That's not once per turn. Like I know it's at the end of your next end step, but
for the record, next end step means the next end step that comes up, not like the next turn's end step.
Well, when you put it like that, I think this card is really good. 3 mana, the downside is, instead of drawing, you can't draw anymore, and whenever you have to discard for cost of anything, it's banished instead. But the ability to have a non-once per turn and banish cards from the top of your deck face down, and then add that many at the end step, that sounds kind of good. Like, not gonna lie, that's something I want in Yu-Gi-Oh! But I know people are gonna be mad if it gets added in Yu-Gi-Oh! In any way, shape, or form. I think people get mad with Gold Sarcophagus. That card's limited. Yeah, I think this is a good card. Not gonna lie, straight up.
Yeah, you are correct. I'm surprised you got that. Yeah, this card is crazy good because you just pay however much life you want. And then you get all those cards back. It doesn't cost any mana to play, so you have all your mana up, so you can cast the cards you got with Necropotent. Like, if you have a lot of life, you can draw, in, Commander format, you still have 40 life. You can pay, 20 life and just start your next turn with just 20 cards in your hand.
Jesus Christ.
This card is arguably maybe the best black spell, at least for drawing, ever printed. You don't draw doing your upkeep, but that hardly matters when you can just draw the cards you need, most likely.
Yeah. That's a really solid card. The downside does not mean much when you can just pay so much life for you to get a bunch of cards at the end of the turn.
Yeah, and then you can get the cards to search out the cards you need from your deck, or you can even get draw spells, because you just don't draw for turn. You can still draw with regular spells, regular draw spells if you run those too.
Yeah, that's a really good card. I like this card.
Yeah. Like this is one of my favorite matches. I love that component. This is like one of Magic's like staple like the transition between like a good player and a bad player. Seeing like why this card is good, and for not playing Magic, you saw right into it. You were right on the money with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this card would be so toxic in Yu-Gi-Oh.
Oh, absolutely. This card would be so busted in Yu-Gi-Oh because you don't even no mana resource. Like even if you get to the end step, you just pay your life and just draw all your hand traps to make your opponent really unable to play. You did very well. You were only wrong on like a few of them. You did very well. I thought I was gonna get you on some of them. I think the only one.
My Yu-Gi-Oh knowledge paid off into getting most of these cards correctly.
I think the only like big whiff was probably Path to Exile. Was the only one that was like the big whiff.
Exile, yeah, and that was the big one. I mean, you could also say Oko, but I kind of got the the correct parts of what people use the card for.
Yeah, I was curious if you're gonna get why if you're gonna see that.
Estimating Oko.
Yeah, I also me not saying the whole summoning this thing also probably helps contribute to that.
Yeah,
but you saw the reason why people play that card and why it's so good.
I honestly had fun. I've always wanted to try and get into. I tried like once. I got like 3 starter decks from like a library, literally for free, and I still just don't know what to do with them. I still barely even know how to play this game. Yeah, I just stick with stick with Yu-Gi-Oh for my card game fixes, and I just cry when I play Master Duel. So I'm an average Yu-Gi-Oh player.
You exceeded your invitation before you started recording this. You were like, "Oh, I don't think I'm gonna get anywhere." You got like almost all of them, right? You if this was a test, you would have aced it. You got like 2 out of like the 20 wrong. It very.
Don't worry. I agree with you. I thought I was gonna get so much wrong while doing this, but no. I'm glad. I got pretty much most of it down.
Yeah, you didn't fall for any of my dastardly tricks. Yeah. Thank you for coming, and then for those who are watching the videos, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, maybe you want to see me do more, maybe get more people on. I don't know, but thank you all for watching. I've been Jake Peg. That's been Gamer Guy. You can see him on this channel more on the Wheel of Shield, which will be appearing somewhere on this screen during the end card, probably.
Yeah, watch it, please. It's funny. I got the best cards, and Jake cries most of the time.
I did lose that season, but at the time of recording this, season 2 is in the talks. We haven't started recording it yet, but you'll be seeing more Gamer Guy on the channel soon. Maybe he'll wind up on more Magic content. Who knows? I do more Magic content now than Yu-Gi-Oh these days, but we'll see what happens. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Later.